remember this story clearly from my childhood. One of the adults told it years ago, and it stuck with me ever since. In a remote village in the Novosibirsk region of Siberia, strange and frightening things began to happen. At night, some unknown creature started sneaking into the villagers' chicken coops. Only a few people ever saw it, but the ones who did described something so terrifying it made your blood run cold. They said the creature had a short body standing on extremely long legs with claws, and from its small head hung two enormous fangs pointing downward. They looked almost like tusks. The villagers quickly gave the mysterious nighttime visitor a name: the Sabertooth. The monster hadn't attacked cattle or people yet. It seemed to specialize only in chickens and geese. But that didn't make things any less terrifying. What scared people the most was the way it killed. The creature didn't eat its prey. It tore the birds apart, leaving their bodies shredded, almost completely drained of blood. Because of its strange appearance and behavior, rumors spread through the village like wildfire. People began whispering about a werewolf that would soon strangle every animal in the village. After sunset, the villagers locked themselves inside their homes, armed with shotguns, axes, and pitchforks. This went on for 2 months. Every 3 or 4 nights, the attacks returned. The men of the village tried everything. They set traps around the coops and waited in ambush. But somehow, the creature always avoided them. It was as if it knew exactly where danger was hiding. It would appear where no one expected it, strike, and disappear. And then, suddenly, it stopped. Just like that, the terrifying Sabertooth vanished as if it had never existed. For about a month, the villagers still locked their doors at night, out of habit. But eventually life returned to normal. For 2 peaceful years, nothing unusual happened. Then winter came, and with it, another nightmare. Wolves. That year, the Siberian winter was brutal. Temperatures dropped to nearly -40 degrees, and heavy snow fell almost every day. Wild animals in the forest froze or disappeared, and the wolves grew desperate. Soon, packs of them began coming into the village, looking for easy prey. Sometimes they dragged off a careless yard dog. Sometimes they even broke into livestock sheds. And they didn't travel alone. There were 10 wolves in a pack, sometimes more. Even with a shotgun, not every farmer dared to confront them. At night, the grey predators roamed the village almost like it belonged to them. Still, the hunters stayed alert. Whenever someone fired a shot somewhere in the village, the other men would immediately grab their rifles and run to help. One freezing evening in February, gunshots suddenly echoed from the edge of the village. From the yard of an elderly woman everyone called Aunt Valia. The nearby men rushed over with their rifles. Valia had lived alone for many years. Her husband had gone missing during the war and never returned. She believed with all her heart that one day he would come home. She never remarried and never had children. But she was known as one of the kindest people in the village. She worked as the local veterinarian, and the village kids often brought her injured animals, a limping kitten, a wounded bird. They knew Aunt Valia would always try to save them, almost like Dr. Dolittle, the children used to say. But when the men arrived at her yard that night, they saw a heartbreaking scene. Valia was sitting in the snow, covered in blood, next to what looked like the torn body of a dog. She held the animal's head gently in her lap, stroking it while quietly sobbing. "Rijik, my poor Rijik." But as the hunters came closer, they realized something strange. This was not a dog. Resting in the woman's lap was a head with two enormous upper fangs, like those of a prehistoric saber-toothed tiger. Long clawed legs stretched along the shredded body with a short tail. The fur was impossible to identify because it was soaked in blood. The animal Valia was mourning was already dead. They took the shaken woman inside and gave her hot tea. After she calmed down, she told them what had happened. 2 years earlier, when the entire village was terrified of the mysterious Sabertooth, Valia had also locked herself inside at night, hoping the creature would pass her home by. But one night, she woke to frantic noises from her chicken coop. She grabbed her late husband's double-barrel shotgun and ran outside. Inside the coop, the chickens were screaming and flapping in panic. In the far corner, she saw glowing green eyes. A strange, red-colored animal with dark tufts on its ears crouched there, showing 2 enormous fangs in its upper jaw. Valia was about to pull the trigger, but something stopped her. The creature looked nothing like a monster. As an experienced veterinarian, she immediately recognized it. It was a young lynx, and its front paw was caught in a wolf trap. The woman slowly lowered the shotgun. Speaking softly, she approached the injured animal. The lynx flattened its ears and hissed, but it didn't attack. As Valia got closer, she noticed something even stranger. The lynx had a severe deformity of its mouth. Its lower jaw was almost completely missing. Because of that, the upper fangs had never worn down and had grown to enormous lengths. With such a defect, hunting and chewing food would have been almost impossible. It was a miracle the animal had survived at all. But Valia was both a veterinarian and a compassionate soul. She decided she would help it. Very carefully, she freed the paw from the steel trap. The freezing cold had weakened the spring, so the trap had only damaged the skin and soft tissue. She treated the wound with hydrogen peroxide. The lynx sat surprisingly still, as if it somehow understood she was trying to help. Looking closer, Valia realized how incredibly thin the animal was, and suddenly she understood everything. The reason it attacked chickens and drank their blood. With its broken jaw, the lynx couldn't chew meat or crush bones. The only way it could feed was by tearing prey apart with its claws and licking the blood. The woman pitied the starving animal. She locked it inside an empty shed so it wouldn't escape and went back to the house, where she ground fresh meat into soft mince. Then she returned. Holding a small ball of minced meat in her palm, she offered it to the lynx. The animal hissed at first, but then slowly extended its tongue between the huge fangs and licked the food from her hand. Then again, and again. Soon Valia had to bring more. That was how a strange friendship began between a woman and a wild animal. She named him Rijik. While his paw healed, he stayed in the shed and she fed him minced meat every day. After a week, he looked completely different. His sides filled out and his fur began to shine. After meals, he even started purring, though he still refused to let her pet him. Valia never told the neighbors. She knew they would immediately kill the monster. After 2 weeks, she finally opened the shed door. "Go on, Rijik, go home." back to the forest. The lynx stepped outside, sniffed the air, and slowly trotted toward the woods, limping slightly. Valia even shed a tear watching him go, but a few days later, he came back. Late at night, he jumped over her fence and lay down on the porch, waiting patiently until she woke up. In the morning, she fed him again, and he purred gratefully before disappearing back into the forest. From then on, Rijik visited her yard from time to time. He never entered the house, but eventually he allowed Valia to pet him, and when she did, he purred loudly, like 3 cats at once. And then came that freezing February evening. Valia was walking from her bathhouse toward the house, and suddenly she froze in terror. Between her and the house, shadows moved across the snow. Wolves. A whole pack had slipped into her yard. Her shotgun was inside the house. In her hands, she held nothing but an empty bucket. Running back to the bathhouse was impossible. They would catch her instantly. The wolves began to close in. Valia gripped the bucket handle tightly. This is it, she thought. My end has come. And then suddenly, a shadow shot off the roof of the shed like an arrow and slammed into one of the wolves. A furious roar filled the yard. Another wolf began spinning wildly as something tore at it with powerful hind claws, sending bloody fur flying in every direction. The stunned pack rushed into the fight. Using that moment, Valia ran for the house. She burst inside, grabbed her shotgun, and ran back onto the porch. She fired both barrels into the air. The wolves scattered into the darkness. When the noise faded, only 2 bodies remained in the blood-stained snow. One was a wolf. The other... Valia walked closer. The creature with the long fangs was still breathing, but weaker and weaker with every moment. She sat beside him in the snow, gently placing his head on her lap. The life slowly faded from the green cat-like eyes. A warm tongue touched her hand once, and then went still. Rijik, my poor Rijik. Not long after, the neighbors arrived, and it was from one of those men that I later heard this incredible story. A few days ago, I got back from a week-long hunting trip in the forest. We went after a bear. The hunt went well, at least for us, not so much for the bear. While we were out there, I heard a strange story. The area where we were hunting is somewhere in the northeast of the Sverdlovsk region. I won't name the exact place. No need to embarrass the local authorities. You understand why in a minute. In the abandoned logging settlement where we stayed, 3 families still live. One couple has no children. The second family has a 14-year-old boy. And the third family has 2 kids, a brother and sister. They're close in age, 4th grade and 3rd grade. This story is about those kids. When they were born, the settlement still had some life in it. A few dozen families lived there. There was a small school with a library, a tiny grocery store, and even a public payphone with a city number installed about 8 years ago. The phone didn't last long though. The line broke after about 6 months, and nobody ever came to fix it. But the orange plastic dome of the payphone booth still stands out there on an empty patch of land, like the last reminder that civilization once existed. Because these days, apart from that lonely artifact, nothing around there suggests that it's the 21st century. The logging company shut down about 3 years ago. People either died or moved away to stay with relatives in nearby towns. The few families who remained had nowhere else to go. No one was offering them apartments in town in exchange for their abandoned houses. And moving into the run-down dormitory near the prison colony 15 kilometers away didn't sound very appealing either. So they stayed. The men worked at the colony. The women stayed home, taking care of the household and the kids. During the summer, life there was paradise for children. Berries, mushrooms, fishing, swimming in the river. But once school started, things became complicated. The nearest school was in a small town, about 40 kilometers away. To get there, the kids first had to reach the prison colony, then catch the staff bus. After dropping off the guards, that bus would take the few school children to town. Sometimes the kids were sent to a boarding school for the winter, but they kept running away. After spending their summers roaming free through forests and rivers, the prison-like atmosphere of the boarding school felt unbearable. Eventually, the fathers came up with a solution. In the abandoned scrapyard of the old logging company, they found an old diesel rail trolley, a maintenance vehicle that used to run along the narrow-gauge railway. The men repaired it, modified it, and built a small platform and a crude cabin on top. They installed a rotating driver's seat and benches for passengers. You see, between the settlement and the prison colony, there was an old narrow-gauge railway line. It hadn't been used in years, but the tracks were still in decent shape. Back in the day, a small locomotive ran along it, hauling logs to a woodworking shop inside the colony where inmates worked. But once the logging company shut down, the railway was abandoned. The tracks started disappearing under young trees, bushes, and tall grass. There was another road, technically shorter, but it was only passable in summer and only when the weather was dry. So the men cleared the entire 15-kilometer stretch of track. In some places, they even replaced the railroad ties. After that, they tested the rail trolley themselves. Eventually, they taught the oldest kid, Danila, a 6th grader, how to drive it. The controls were simple. A button, 2 levers, and a pedal. Honestly, a monkey could figure it out. From September until the heavy snow came, the 3 kids rode that trolley to the colony every morning. And again in the spring, once the snow started melting, until May. They left around 6 in the morning. By 8, they reached the colony, parked the trolley on a sidetrack, and then took the staff bus to school. In the evening, they returned the same way. At first, one of the adults accompanied them. But after a while, the parents relaxed and started letting the kids go on their own. The whole previous school year passed without any serious incidents. But this year was different. Even before the snow came, people began noticing wolves. A whole pack. They would appear along different parts of the railway. The wolves never came too close. They just watched from a distance, quietly, as if waiting. Wolves had been seen before, of course, but usually just 1 or 2, not an entire pack. Just in case, the kids always kept a long fire hook on the trolley, a heavy metal pole with a sharp hook at the end, something they could use to scare off predators if one got too close. But that wasn't the strangest thing. The kids said that on foggy days, at one particular place along the track, they sometimes saw a man standing on top of a hill. The railway there ran between 2 high ridges, like the bottom of a canyon, and on one of those hills stood a man. He wore a thick winter jacket. Sometimes it looked like a prison uniform coat. On his head was a black Ushanka hat, the kind prisoners often wore. He just stood there, silently. Whenever the trolley passed below, he would slowly turn his head to follow it, and then raise his hand and wave. Because of the distance and the fog, the kids could never see his face. At first, they were terrified, but after a while, they got used to him. Eventually, they even started waving back and shouting hello. The strange thing was, he never answered. He never shouted back. He never moved. He just stood there silently with his hand raised, like a statue. The fathers worked at the prison colony, but none of them had heard about any escaped inmates in years. And prisoners weren't allowed to work outside the colony anymore, not since the logging operation shut down. So the adults decided the kids were probably imagining things, or maybe they were just bored. Besides, the children insisted that the silent man was twice as tall as a normal person. Then, in early November, something happened. One evening, the three kids were heading home on the trolley after school, 2 boys and the little girl. They had already covered about half the distance when they noticed something disturbing. Along the edge of the forest, dark shapes began moving. Wolves. In the growing darkness, their eyes glinted faintly in the twilight, and instinctively, the kids felt fear. Before, the wolves had always kept their distance, but this time was different. The pack began running along the tree line, in the same direction as the trolley. That summer had been unusually dry. There had even been forest fires in some places. Food in the forest had become scarce, and hunger makes predators bold. Danila slammed the pedal down, trying to outrun them. But the heavy old diesel machine wasn't built for racing. On a straight track, it could barely reach 30 kilometers per hour. And at high speed, the engine started sputtering. Meanwhile, the wolves were getting closer. Some of them jumped onto the railway embankment, where the ground was easier to run on than through deep forest snow. Little Anya began to cry. Her brother Mashutka tried to comfort her. "Don't cry, Anya. Look how big our fire hook is. Even if the wolves catch us, I'll spear them with it." He gripped the red wooden handle with both tiny fists. There were almost 20 wolves. They surrounded the trolley from both sides and were quickly catching up. The boys started shouting, hoping to scare them away, but the wolves only grew more excited. The hunting frenzy had begun. When the first wolves started trying to leap onto the shaking platform of the trolley, Danila ordered Mashutka to take the controls. Grabbing the fire hook, he began fighting the animals off. Then suddenly, the track began sloping downhill. The trolley picked up speed. They were descending into a low valley, the same place where they had seen the silent man before. And then the engine coughed, jerking once, twice, and died. The trolley kept rolling downhill on momentum, but it was slowly losing speed. Danila tried desperately to restart the engine, but nothing worked. The wolves were closing in. The kids prepared for a fight. Danila grabbed the fire hook again. Mashitka picked up a rusty crowbar from the floor. Even little Anya was handed a piece of metal. But suddenly the pack stopped, all at once, as if they had slammed into an invisible wall. The wolves gathered together, staring at the escaping trolley, snarling and baring their teeth. but none of them moved forward. Then suddenly the entire pack turned around, tails tucked, and ran the other way. A few minutes later, the distant sound of frustrated howling echoed through the forest. What just happened? The kids huddled together on the slowing trolley, staring ahead into the darkness, trying to understand what had stopped the wolves. They saw nothing, only darkness. Then suddenly, Anya screamed, "Look, look!" She pointed behind them. The boys turned around. At first they saw nothing except a snowy hillside and the black tops of spruce trees. "Anya, what are you talking about?" "Can't you see him? That man, on the hill. He's waving at us again." And then the boys thought they saw it too. A tall, familiar silhouette. When the trolley finally stopped, the kids climbed down and walked the rest of the way home. Only 6 or 7 kilometers remained. Their parents hadn't even started worrying yet. But when the children told them what had happened on the railway, a lot of grey hair appeared that night. After that, the parents sent all 3 kids to a boarding school until spring. No arguments. The story caused quite a stir in the district. Police came, officials came, wildlife experts came. The wolves were ordered to be hunted down. The parents were scolded for negligence and even threatened with losing custody of their children. But when people heard about the silent man in the winter coat, one of the older prison employees remembered something. A very old story, almost identical. Many years ago, during winter, a prisoner worker had been sent from the colony to the logging settlement on a rail trolley. Back then, some well-behaved inmates were allowed outside the colony without guards. That man left at night, but he never arrived. The next day, they found him halfway along the track, or rather, what was left of him. A wolf pack had torn him apart. The remains were scattered across nearly a kilometre of forest. There was barely anything left to bury. About 15 years ago, I found my mum an apartment in a brand new 5-story building on the outskirts of Nizhny Tagil. She wanted to live closer to her garden plot. From the building to the garden, it was barely a 3-minute walk. And that little place of ours had everything: a vegetable garden, a few chickens, an old watchdog, and pretty much the whole countryside package, except for a cow. The building was still filling up with residents. Half of the tenants were families who used to live in the private houses that had been demolished to build the complex. As for newcomers, there was only one person who moved into the 5th floor. A young woman, very pleasant looking. You know how it is in small outskirts neighborhoods. Everyone knows everyone. And when someone new moves in, people start asking questions immediately. Who are you? Where are you from? Married? Kids? But the new girl didn't really open up much. All anyone managed to find out was that her name was Inna. She wasn't married, had no children, and her parents lived in some distant village. She didn't visit anyone, but she didn't avoid the neighbors either. Sometimes the local women would stop by with excuses, borrow some salt, make a phone call, that kind of thing. Mostly they were just curious about the new tenant. Still, Inna never let anyone pass the doorway of her apartment. That only made people more curious. And she stood out. In that little working-class settlement, where most women wore headscarves and padded jackets, she always looked neat and well kept. She didn't wear makeup like the others, didn't flirt, didn't chatter endlessly like most of the local ladies. But somehow every man in the area started looking at her. I saw her quite often too, since she lived in the same building as my mum. But honestly, she didn't make much of an impression on me. Maybe because I had spent most of my life working around women and had seen plenty of beauties. Or maybe I just didn't pay close attention. Back then, I owned a small grocery store in that neighborhood. The staff was small, and whenever someone called in sick, I'd come in and covered the shift myself. I'd done everything there at one point or another. Worked the register, unloaded deliveries, you name it. One evening, I was sitting behind the register in an empty store. Hardly anyone in the village cared much about shopping trips. I was bored out of my mind when Inna walked in. For me, she was just another customer. She wandered around the store for about 5 minutes, picked up a few small things and a 3-litre jar of pomegranate juice, then came to the register. The store was empty, nothing distracting me. Normally I could ring up a couple of items in 10 seconds, but when she stepped up and looked me straight in the eyes, something strange happened. It was like I suddenly drifted into a sweet dream. A wave of intense desire hit me so strongly that I was stunned. I had never felt anything like it in my life, and believe me, I wasn't inexperienced. But there I was, sitting there in a daze, ringing up the purchase, thinking clearly. Or at least, I thought I was. Inna didn't say a word. She simply turned and left. And I sat there, floating in that strange feeling for another half hour. Eventually, I snapped out of it and checked the register. That's when I realized something. She never paid for the juice. I had rung up the sale, but she hadn't given me any money. Pomegranate juice wasn't cheap for our little shop. It wasn't going to bankrupt us, of course. Still, the sweet memory of the encounter was slightly spoiled. What surprised me most was the hypnosis, or whatever it was. I had never been suggestible. Back in Soviet times, hypnotists would come around everywhere. Schools, army units, clubs. I had watched plenty of those shows. They always tried their little test to see who was susceptible. Not once did it work on me. They couldn't make me fall asleep, couldn't glue my hands together, nothing. Even those famous TV healers like Kashbarovsky and Chumak never impressed me at all. In fact, after reading a bunch of books from my grandfather's library, I had even experimented with hypnosis myself on my siblings and friends, and it actually worked. I stopped after one experiment went too far, and I barely managed to wake my younger cousin. Scared the hell out of me. And yet here was some random woman who walked by, said nothing, and somehow put me into a trance. What kind of spell was that? But 2 days later she came back into the store, smiling. "I forgot to pay you for the juice the other day," she said. "Here." And she looked at me with a sly little smile. It felt like she knew exactly what had happened to me. What a witch. The strange part was that now, standing there talking to her, I felt absolutely nothing. No trance, no excitement, just a normal conversation. After that, I didn't work the register much, so I only saw her occasionally when I visited my mum. But rumors about her had already started spreading. People said she was stealing other women's husbands, and that the affairs always ended badly. One jealous wife supposedly pushed her husband so far that he got drunk, locked her inside their house, and set it on fire. Then he couldn't stand her screaming and ran into the flames himself. Another man beat his wife to death during a fight and then shot himself with a hunting rifle. Someone else poisoned himself. Another drowned. Another hanged himself. All of that really did happen. But blaming everything on one woman seemed ridiculous. Ina never flirted with anyone, not even a hint. She had moved in alone and was still living alone 2 years later. No men ever visited her apartment. My mum would have known. Still, the bad reputation stuck. Probably because of that, Ina tried to keep a low profile. She left early for work in the city centre and came back late after dark. One night, my old friend Vladik stayed over at my mum's place. During the day, we had been building something at the garden plot. Later, we grilled some shashlik and had a few drinks, then headed back to the apartment to wash up and sleep. Right at the entrance of the building, Vladik literally collided with Ina. She had gone out to throw away the trash. They bumped into each other, almost fell into an embrace. We laughed it off and went upstairs, but Vladik was already caught in the net. Soon he started finding excuses to come help me at the garden, build a shed, fix the greenhouse, carry boards. And every evening he somehow ended up lingering near the building entrance, just to catch a glimpse of Ina. I finally told him, "Why are you acting like a shy schoolboy? Just go talk to her." Vladik was a modest guy though, so I had to help. We waited outside until she showed up, stopped her with some random question, started chatting, and introduced ourselves. Turned out she was actually very friendly. No arrogance, good sense of humor. You could tell she had missed simple human conversation. Honestly, if I'd been single, I might have tried my luck myself. But I had a wife and kids. Vladik, on the other hand, was single. About the same age as her too, somewhere around 25. After that, the two of them started seeing each other regularly. Vladik even visited her parents in their village several times, helped them around the house, brought furniture, even delivered a construction trailer from his job to their yard. Soon he was at Ina's apartment almost every day, always with flowers, cakes, little gifts. He adored her, and the stories he told me were unbelievable. One night, he was walking her home through a rough neighbourhood called Redstone, full of local troublemakers. Suddenly, a group of 8 or 10 drunk guys surrounded them. Vladik was never exactly brave, so I can imagine how terrified he must have been. But Ina calmly took 2 of the guys by the arms, led them aside, whispered something to them, then came back to Vladik and walked on. The rest of the gang simply stepped aside under her gaze. Another time she came with Vladik to my garden. Our huge Caucasian shepherd Efimik normally barked at strangers from 50 meters away. Even Vladik got yelled at by that dog every single time. But when Ina arrived, that fierce watchdog suddenly started wagging his tail like a toy poodle and licking her hands. That was shocking enough. But the strangest thing of all was Vladik himself. He had been a chronic epileptic with severe hypertension and constant headaches. After meeting Ina, all his health problems disappeared. Within a year, doctors reduced his disability status. Another year later, it was removed completely. Yet their relationship remained strange. Despite all the love between them, they never went further than hugs and kisses. Vladik complained to me about it constantly. He even felt insecure about it. "I want to marry her," he told me. "Only her." But Ina always gently avoided intimacy, and after about a year, she slowly started pushing him away, finding excuses not to meet. Eventually, Vladik stopped visiting her. Then one day, My mum told me something shocking. Inna died. I didn't tell Vladik right away. When I finally did, he turned pale and burst into tears. That weekend we went to visit her grave. The cemetery was right on the edge of town. We brought flowers and found the fresh mound with a wooden cross. Her photo was smiling from the little oval frame. But when I looked at the dates on the grave, my jaw dropped. February 29th, 1944 to August 13th, 2002. Inna had been 58 years old, yet she had looked no older than 30. When we were leaving the grave, both of us suddenly smelled that familiar fragrance, the same scent she always carried. Something like lilac in May, a soft breeze, and the scent was gone.